Record numbers of Americans tested positive for coronavirus this weekend, and millions of Americans are simply out of work. According to the Washington Post, some 100,000 small businesses here in the United States permanently shuttered from March to May. No matter what metric you look at, it's so clear that so many Americans are suffering during this pandemic and desperately need help, and they need help right now. But talks over economic relief, they are clearly still gridlocked here in Washington. I'm joined now by former 2020 Democratic presidential candidate Andrew Yang. Andrew, thanks so much for joining us. Before I get to the stimulus talks, I want to get your quick reaction to the news that the Vice President, Mike Pence, will keep campaigning, even though he was in very close contact with 5 staffers who tested positive for COVID. Speaking for your experience in the primary, is campaigning, quote, essential work right now?
This unfortunately fits a pattern we've seen from this administration, Wolf, where if they are forced to balance preserving the health and safety of themselves, the public, their teams, or political campaigning, fundraising, and preserving this administration's hold on power, they tend to choose the latter, unfortunately. So it's disappointing, but not wholly surprising.
The CDC says he should be quarantining for at least 14 days right now, given the fact that he was in close proximity for so long with these 5 associates. Many people were hoping this administration learned a lesson and would change its approach to the coronavirus after the president was infected. But this seems to be playing out, Andrew, the same way as that first White House outbreak. Do you think this will actually drive away some of those remaining, I don't know how many there are, remaining undecided voters?
There are many Americans who are deeply concerned about how the coronavirus is being handled by this administration, and campaigning in the midst of it, having events where people are showing up that aren't properly socially distanced, or in some cases not wearing masks, fits a pattern that is turning off many, many voters. You're seeing it in some of the local media coverage that's following after these events take place, where a bunch of journalists are asking, was this event truly necessary and in the public's interest?
Let's discuss the stalled COVID relief talks. This is what we heard from the 2 sides earlier today. Watch this.
We've continued to make offer after offer after offer, and Nancy continues to move the goalposts. And as you know, we're up to $1.9 trillion. I personally have talked to the leader multiple times. I've talked to senators multiple times. And at the end of the day, it was the Democrats just last week who said that they weren't going to support a $500 billion deal. So they said no to some relief coming to Americans.
They keep moving the goalposts. They every time they say we move the goalposts, that means they're projecting what they did.
Andrew, as you know, millions of Americans are so desperate. They're out of work right now. So many of them, they can't pay the rent. They can't even buy enough food for their kids. Who should they blame for this impasse?
They should blame the dysfunction in Washington, Wolf, though I'm still cautiously optimistic that we're going to see a deal emerge in the next 9-10 days, in large part because the interests of the American people are so on the line. A study just came out that said that 1/3 of American workers have either lost their jobs or had to change jobs because of the pandemic, and that 25% of workers have had their wages go down. So in the face of that kind of overwhelming need, if you look at the politics involved, Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats should be chomping at the bit to get a deal done for the sake of their constituents. And Donald Trump and Steve Mnuchin have signaled that they want a deal as well. So if a deal can be struck early this week, I believe it still has a chance to get relief into the hands of the American people during this window. If we miss this window before the election, we could be waiting until February, which would be devastating for millions of Americans.
If it doesn't happen before November 3rd, do you think it could happen during the lame duck session, irrespective of who's elected president?
The politics unfortunately shift in a way that make it less likely. Big bills seldom get done during lame duck sessions after an election. And if you look at the president's interest, his interest will be sky high to try and get relief or signal relief to his supporters before they come out and vote next Tuesday. But then after that day, do we really think Donald Trump is going to be as concerned with trying to get relief into people's hands. So this window is crucially important, really just the next several days early this week in order to get legislation pushed to the Senate while they're still in session before Election Day.
I know you're not involved in the negotiations, but do you think both sides, at least at this sensitive moment, are simply playing politics with this relief bill that is so desperately needed by so many millions and millions of Americans?
I heard today from a laid-off tour bus operator in New York. He's 64 years old. He doesn't have a job anymore, and he says, "Where is my stimulus check?" Those are the people that I'd be thinking of if I were on either side of this negotiation. And if it were me, I would look at that interest and say, look, this may not be the perfect deal, but we need to get a deal done before Election Day. And then to the extent that there are imperfections or problems, we can always come back together and pass a new bill in the new year. But people need relief right now, from that tour bus operator to millions, or former tour bus operator to millions of other Americans around the country.
There's so many suffering and desperate people out there right now. Andrew Yang, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Wolf.